All right, so we are still on lesson 2 of the listen section of our Love, Listen, Lead. And if you remember last time, we talked a little bit about the Columbo approach. That always inquiring, always seeking to understand, always trying to draw more and more out of a person by what they are saying and really listening and that active listening. And so there were the 3 types of questions if you look on page 1. What do you mean by? What does it mean when you say, help me to understand what you are going through? Or type 2, why do you think that's true? Or how did you come to think this way? In other words, share with me the experience, the background that led you to this opinion. And both those types of questions, they not only treat people like their opinions matter, but they treat people with the respect that says, I don't know everything and I can't understand what you think or how you believe unless you share with me a little bit of yourself. And so it gives that person the respect to say, I don't think you're stupid because you think this way. Which I think we can be honest in America is how a lot of the discourse tends to come across, isn't it? If you think this way, it's because you're not very smart, or because you listen to that news agency, or because you are part of this group of people, and it's very easy to dismiss people and their opinions instead of actually listening and following through with what they believe. So, then once you have gained understanding, then you can begin to say, well, what have you thought about? So that question that invites a person to share, to let you share your thoughts. And now that is where we are going to pick up. And I don't know how this is going to go with the group that we have this morning. The lesson has some role-playing built into it. And I've never liked role-playing in a classroom setting. And at the same time, it might be valuable to give it a try. Or I might just really ask you to do your assignments very well this week. But let's pick up the video. This is about where we left off. We might be a little bit behind. We might review a little bit.
Please choose a partner as we role play using the Columbo approach. Each person will take a turn being a skeptic and also the witness. In this scenario, the skeptic's objection is one we discussed earlier, namely that he believes Christians are hypocrites. Now, when it's your turn to play the skeptic, ask yourself what might make a person come to believe that. What might they mean by that? And so as you play this role, play as a skeptic, also who is thoughtful and kind. In other words, I ask you to keep the role play light, rather than having strong feelings that can easily escalate and defeat this process. So stay calm, be nice. When you play the role of the witness, ask what do you mean by that question, just as often as you can think of a way to meaningfully ask it. Next, ask the how have you come to think this way question, as often as it seems to help to open up a worthwhile conversation and create understanding. If you do have you thought of this question to ask, by all means do so. Just don't be in any hurry to get there. Before trying this out for yourself, take a look at this short demonstration to give you an idea of how it might look. In this scenario, the skeptic's objection is that Christians are intolerant. So this is Jacob. Jacob is playing the role of a pretty serious skeptic about the Christian faith. And this is Leah, who is playing the role of a Christian witness who wants to be the best listener she can. Go ahead, Leah.
So Jacob, I've gotten the impression that you kind of have a problem with Christianity. Is that right?
Well, Christians are just so intolerant.
Okay, what do you mean by intolerant?
They're kind of a bunch of bigots.
Okay, I don't think I quite understand. What do you mean by bigotry?
You know, closed-minded, judgmental.
Okay, so you notice that the listener can stay in this mode of listening just as long as she feels she needs to, just to understand what this person is trying to say and what he really means by it. At some point, she can transition to a new kind of question. Go ahead.
So what made you think that Christians are all judgmental and bigoted?
Well, there was this one girl at school who constantly would tell me that, you know, God wasn't okay with what I was doing and would try to push their views upon me, and I just wasn't comfortable with that.
Okay, I can see how that would be hard, but how did you come to think that this one girl represented all of Christianity?
Well, it wasn't just one girl. I mean, there were others who did similar things and were closed-minded and wouldn't necessarily always listen to what I had to say.
So again, you can see that Leah can stay in this mode just as long as she feels like she needs to. She's simply asking how did you come to think this way. She's drawing out the story of how Jacob has come to hold his opinions. Now, if she's ready, she may actually transition to a third kind of question based on experiences maybe that she's had before. So go ahead, Leah.
So have you thought about how you're looking at just a few people and using that to represent your view of Christianity as a whole?
So have you thought about this question where she begins to interject her own point of view based on a really serious understanding of the person that she is listening to, that really can lead to a further testimony? Take a few minutes now to role-play the Columbo approach. Remember, in your role-play, the skeptic's position is that Christians are hypocrites. Please pause the video now as you give the Columbo approach a try. After you are done discussing.
So, I don't know if I should give you the option whether or not we want to do that role play within our groups here, or maybe we should just discuss how that looks. What's the benefit of asking those questions such as, what do you mean by, or what does it mean when you say, or help me to understand what you're saying? What's the benefit of that? So using the example of that conversation, what was the big example, or what was the big advantage? Okay, so you're giving him a chance to state what he has against Christians. Okay.
Based on one experience with one person, it's okay. You all have to.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that surprised me is she did more talking than he did. And, we were in the listening section. That kind of just surprised me that the way that was presented.
So that's one of the downfalls of role playing, right? So if you're asking me to pretend that I think all Christians are bigots, there's two ways that that's likely going to go if I'm doing the pretending. Either I'm going to be very obnoxious because I'm imagining the most obnoxious person who doesn't want anything to do with Christianity, and so I'm going to present the worst case scenario. I had my catechism students role play telling the Great Exchange, if you've ever done the Great Exchange as part of your Bible study. And it's a witnessing tool. And it was very uneven, and it very much depended on how cooperative the person who is supposed to be learning is. Because if you don't want to learn, if you're going to pretend like you're a person who doesn't want to listen, that gets very frustrating for the other people. At the same time, if you're just like, oh yeah, then you don't have anything to say. And so I think, as well as Jacob and Leah did, that's kind of the weakness of this approach. He doesn't actually have the opinion that Christians are bigots, so he has to think of a way to have the conversation without actually putting forward his real position, because he doesn't have a real position. And so that's why.
I will say that sometimes after listening is, it depends on how hesitant, it depends on who you are. But if people don't want to talk about it, they take a lot of questions to get to open up. And so they want their short answer to turn you off so you go away. And so I do think showing that I do actually care and I'm willing to listen and I'm asking questions rather than judging me right away says, off the bat, if you're taking their example, off the bat, I'm clearly not judgmental like what you think I am.
Good.
But I do think that sometimes is true, that it takes that many questions to get people to answer you if they are not wanting to talk about it.
And, if you're coming from the perspective of a skeptic or someone who's actually against Christianity, but it's a friend, someone you want to witness to, it is likely that they give their excuse as a reason to just either stop talking about this or to have a reason to dismiss your opinion altogether. So yes, you might need to keep drawing out, or you could hit the nerve and boom, they're ready to go. But I think also asking for that definition. What makes you say? Or what do you mean by intolerant? What do you mean by bigot? Because that can mean different things to different people. But also, what is our natural inclination if someone says Christians are intolerant or Christians are bigots? Yeah, to get immediately defensive. And then what do you end up doing?
Build a higher wall.
You end up almost proving their case, right? See? You can't even talk about this. This is something that's important to me. You can't even talk about it. Therefore, you have proved my case that Christians are intolerant bigots. What about the type 2 question? In this scenario, why do you think that is true? What's that really asking for?
To justify their thinking?
Mm-hmm. And how do people normally do that? Right. He's not likely going to go, well, Pew Research did a study last year that said such and such percentage of Wells Lutherans believe such and such a thing, and I think that's a bigoted position. There might be a few people out there who will do that. Or Pastor Borman in his work up in Tigard, he finds that after he has a conversation, people will go to his website, they'll look through the "This is what we believe" section, then there's a link to the Wells, and they'll go to the Wells website, and then they'll go to "This is what we believe" on there, and then they'll pick out the things that they dislike about what we believe and teach, and they'll bring them up to it. And so there are people who will do that sort of research. But usually in a casual conversation that you're having with a friend, they're not going to come with their little notebook of all the reasons why they think Christians are bigots or intolerant, they're going to share a personal experience. In other words, they're going to tell you what? They're going to tell you a story. And it's often much easier for us to understand a person when they tell you a story that is something that matters to them. You think about the other skeptical reasons. Well, I'm a scientist, and science shows this. Or the emotional reason, I just can't believe in a God who would send people to hell. And, well, what's behind that reasoning? Probably there's some compassion there. And how does listening to the story help you get to question 3? Question 3 being, have you thought about
You know where they're coming from.
it?
They've explained to you why they think it's true. And you can offer an option or a different view or
Okay.
perspective.
Right, that way you're actually on topic. If you've actively listened, you've used this approach to draw the person out to actually share their experience or why they think that way, then you're actually going to be responding on topic. What else does it do for you? How else does it help you get to question 3? What's expected in a conversation? Two-way communication. And if you have truly given them a chance to share their experience, how often do you think a person would say no to have you thought about? Or can I share my perspective on this? Do you think if you've listened to a person, let them share their story, that they're going to be like, no. Maybe there's obnoxious people out there who would do that, but not likely. Likely they're going to say, yeah, okay, or, huh. And maybe then the roles even switch where they're the active listener and they're trying to draw, I've never thought about that, and then that curiosity is there. Other thoughts? Or we can finish the video now and get to our homework.
Please resume the video. I'd like to wrap up this session by having you consider the power of the open question and to try to have some experiences using that scale between now and the next session. Yes, this is homework. An open question is one that causes a person to reflect. They probably won't answer it the same way if you asked it again some other day. It may send them deep inside. It may start with the words what, or how, or tell me about, or even help me understand. The word why is a way to ask an open question as long as the tone is not rude or too intrusive. A closed question often has the word you as the second word in the sentence. Do you? Were you? Are you? These questions can be answered with yes or no. Of course, people can treat closed questions as if they are open questions. For example, if I ask you, are you worried about this? You might say yes, and then go on to explain your feelings. However, open questions have more power to guide a conversation to even more significant places. So, for your homework, I'm asking you to use open questions to see what sort of spiritual conversations you can have with Christian people in your life. It's a wonderful thing to do. And it may feel a whole lot safer as a place to hone this skill when you are among fellow believers. So, for example, tell me a hymn verse or a scripture that means so much to you right now. Or, what should I be praying for when I think of you? Or, where is God in all your struggles? What's happening with your faith right now? Now, we don't want a person to feel like they're being interrogated, and we generally want the conversation to be mutual in the way we also make disclosures and share our own ideas and stories. So you can intersperse those things in a way that only helps the conversation to be both interesting and important. I found that having spiritual conversations with the people I hope to witness to just is not rocket science. We need not be clever, only a little bit courageous. Hey, do you mind if I ask you, do you believe in God? Yes, that's a closed question, but it's still a great one. And as I think of it, there is not an inexhaustible list of the very most important things we can talk to people about. We can ask about who or what we love, or who loves us and how. We can ask them about meaning or identity, as we cause them to think about where they find those things and how vulnerable those sources are, and the way they bring intolerable pressure or inevitable crushing loss. We can ask about what sort of control a person has or doesn't have when it comes to things that mean the most to them. And what does that do to them to not have control? And then we listen. In genuine fascination and interest in people other than ourselves, we will ask our fondest questions of the people we long to get through to. And we will ask our questions from a heart that genuinely wants to know, even to set ourselves aside and be drawn out of ourselves into their world. This is your mission if you choose to accept it. Ask a few powerful open questions of the people you know well. And please come to the next session with your most compelling examples. See you then. So,
My controller is not being cooperative this morning. It's very distracting. I apologize. So, I think that this assignment would be fairly easy to start working on today. We are going to have people here eating waffles. If you're looking for a conversation starter, we have, my parents have, it's like a game, but it's not a game. It's a deck of conversation starters, or like, what was your favorite song when you were in high school, or things like that. That would get it, just to get people talking. Well, often we shy away from deeper questions because we'd rather talk about superficial things like the Super Bowl or who's going to win. But if you think about, well, how can I use questions like these as conversation starters and see where that leads, it's good practice for us to do it among friends. And if you ask a question like, what should I be praying for when I think of you? Not only is that an open question that allows somebody to share what's going on in their life, but it also benefits you in your week as you go through your daily devotions and you think about the people that you are praying for and the people God has placed in your life. It has benefits. So I do think that assignment is good for us. Any questions? Otherwise, as I queue up the video for lesson 3, this one starts.
Welcome back and let's go.
I didn't tell you to start. This one also has you fill out things as the person is speaking to start with. So we will start there and you can be ready. And a lot of this one is also role playing, so we might kind of go through it more quickly.
Last two lessons, we learned why listening is so critical to our task of proclaiming the gospel. And we learned some ways we can listen more carefully to others. Now we are going to be given the chance to practice what we have learned. Does that sound a little scary? Don't worry, I think you'll have fun. And it will make you more comfortable doing this in your everyday life. Remember, you are learning skills that will help you connect lost souls to their Savior. And what could be more important than that?
In our first two listening sessions, we took our cues on listening from Jesus, as well as from his apostles. To meet people where they are at, we want to pay attention to them the way Jesus did. We want to treat them well, even when we are disagreeing about the reality of Jesus and the truth of Christianity. Now, it should be said that the scriptures are clear about why people reject the truth of Christianity. The sinful flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to his will. In fact, it cannot do so. Jesus said, people don't want to come into the light because their deeds are evil. We know that's what's really going on with people who reject the word of God. And the scriptures are just as clear about the causes of faith. Grace is the attitude in the heart of God that planned our salvation, that chose us for himself in Christ before the world began. The Spirit uses the gospel in word and sacrament to break through to us here in time. He made us alive when we were dead. He revealed himself to us when we were blind. He reconciled us to himself and we as natural-born enemies. Since all this is true, why listen to people? Why this big idea? Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Well, the Apostle Peter called for gentleness and respect. It's a gentle thing to draw out someone's story, to hear it and to hold it. And it's simply respectful to hear and want to understand their honest questions. A recent study suggests that non-Christians have three main problems with Christianity. A small percentage have an intellectual problem. Something just doesn't make sense to them. For this 10% of non-Christians, you could say it's about the mind. A second small sampling of non-Christian people have a problem with the will. They know how they want to live and the kind of people they prefer to associate with, and they don't want anyone to tell them any differently. For most people, if the research is accurate, the dominant problem people have with Christianity is not the mind or the will. Theirs is a problem of the heart. Why is there so much pain and struggle, for example? It's more emotional than rational. Perhaps you can see my point. When I share Jesus with people, I want to know what they are thinking and feeling. I want to know what their main objection is. Each person is living a story I have not lived. And I don't want my words to betray a lack of understanding for what they've been trying to say to me. That's why we're going to spend some time learning how to do something called active listening. Let's take a closer look at the skills of active listening. First, being physically and mentally prepared. This simply means that you make a complete switch to listening. You set yourself and your agenda temporarily aside as you take on the burden of understanding. This is all about the kind of attention you intend to pay to another human being, not only to their words, but to the entire person in front of you. It is as if you two are the only two people in the world. Your focused attention will be reflected in stillness, genuine eye contact, and facial responsiveness. Number two, paraphrase content. This is where you now and then briefly summarize what the other person has said. Here are some pointers. You want to be concise in trying to capture the essence of what was said. Use your own words, be as accurate as you can, and make a note that you don't want to overdo this. You sprinkle in content paraphrases when you need to seek a clear understanding, when the person may be struggling to explain themselves. Or you communicate the fact that you really do understand. At the same time, you are demonstrating how thoroughly involved you are in the conversation. This also ensures that whatever question you ask next is relevant to what the person is saying to you. Number 3, reflection of feeling. This is where you provide feedback to the other person, not what they are saying, but what they seem to be feeling. For example, you're missing him right now, aren't you? As a response to the speaker's sadness. Other examples might be, you seem worried, or I can tell you care deeply about this. Here are some pointers. Again, be concise. Again, strive to be accurate, don't just guess. Once again, you don't need to overdo it. Once or twice in a deep conversation can be enough. Done well, the reflection of feeling can have a remarkable usefulness in helping a person to open up. You signal genuine caring by the fact that you are attentive to the whole person in front of you, not just what they say, but how they are saying it. When you can accurately name another person's experience, you have taken a big step forward toward true empathy. You are giving to someone else that rare gift of being truly seen, being treated as valuable, being accepted, known, and understood. And number 4, open questions. This is a key feature of active listening, in which the listener takes responsibility to guide the conversation to places that are truly worthwhile. You are asked to use open questions in your daily communication as homework following the session before. Here are some pointers. Gently probe the things a person has just said to you, things that may have real significance. Become more comfortable with silences, especially as you take your time to ask yourself what you really want to know at this place in the conversation. We've explained that open questions often are the most powerful, but in a pinch, you may turn a closed question into an open question. Have you asked her about this? Would be a closed question, simply say why or why not, to turn that closed question into an open one. Or, do churches frighten you? That closed question can become an open question by simply saying, help me understand that. You ask open questions to seek clarification and to gain the context you need to understand what a person is really trying to say to you. You ask open questions to draw out a person's story, and you ask them to get down to the underlying feelings or attitudes or beliefs. Do this, and your own words, when it's time to offer them, will come from a mature and robust understanding of the person to whom you want to bring the truth of Jesus Christ. What we're going to do now is give you the opportunity to try these skills on for size. And we'll take them one at a time. An exercise I want to describe to you with Leah and Jacob's help here.
Pause for 1 second. If we have time, I think we will go through the exercise in class once. So if one of you, while they're talking and you're observing, think about a story that you like telling. So a personal story that you like telling. And then either I'll have another person practice this, or I will practice the open listening. But one of you needs to have a story you like to tell first, or else it won't work. So I'm just preparing you for that first, and now you'll get to see just kind of how, it doesn't have to be a serious story, as you'll see in their example. It's just to practice the active listener part.
So it's going to go like this. We'll have Jacob begin to tell a story. We'll let him talk for 20, 30 seconds. While he's telling the story, Leah will be completely expressionless with a totally neutral face, if she can. Maybe you can pause after that, and you could ask Jacob, or you could ask at home, what was it like to be listened to that way, with no expression at all coming back to you? Then we'll let Jacob tell more of his story, and we'll add on the first little micro skill as Leah allows herself to express herself in her face and be responsive to what she's hearing Jacob say. And we'll go through several turns like that, always adding the next layer of active listening skills. And the idea is going to be for Leah not to exaggerate these skills, but just to be thoughtful as she adds them in one at a time. For example, why is it so important to think about what you're displaying on your face, and so on. Now that we've practiced these skills step by step, Leah and Jacob are going to put these together in a whole conversation. Okay, Jacob, now you may start to tell your story, and Leah, your task is to have no expression on your face at all, not to react in any way at all to this story. Go ahead.
So, a long time ago, I think I was entering 6th grade, I just had this unforgettable experience playing baseball. Essentially, I headed to the diamond with my dad, just like any other, Saturday afternoon when we played. And we're getting ready to play a couple games. I'm warming up, throwing the ball around, playing catch with my teammate.
Let me stop you there. You're doing very well, Leah. What do you feel like? You listen to like that?
It's very uncomfortable. Yeah, it's hard to keep sharing ideas because you're not getting any reaction to,
Exactly, very well said. All right, Jacob, you may continue your story, and this time Leah, you may have all the facial expressions that you want to have as you take in what Jacob is saying. Don't overdo it, but again, be thinking about thoughtfully adding this layer of your eye contact and your facial expression. So, go ahead, Jacob.
So I'm out there playing catch, warming up with my teammates, getting some practice swings in, fielding a few ground balls, and finally coach calls us in, the game's about to start. Here I am, starting out in the outfield, and I'm the first batter up. With the away team, I'm up to bat, and the first pitch starts coming in, high and tight, first pitch of the season. And I wasn't quite ready for it to come in like that, and it jumped out of the way quick enough, and it hits me right here in the left side.
Okay. So Jacob, tell me how it was different this time for you, as Leah was sending a lot of things back on her face as she communicated to you.
Yeah. Oh, I think last time I mentioned it was just very uncomfortable, and this time I felt comfortable just opening up and sharing what I thought I wanted to share.
Okay, so Jacob, continue your story again, and this time we'll ask you to go ahead and put in what we call a back channel. So you can make certain noises like okay. Just using your voice also to be part of how you say it. I'm paying attention. Okay, let's try that.
So, obviously, after getting hit in the side in the first at bat of the season, I'm a little bit apprehensive about going back to the plate. But nevertheless, here I go. 2 innings later, I'm up to bat, and this pitcher's having a tough game.
Right.
And so I'm a little worried. But here the pitch comes flying in, and it's a little high and tight, and it hits me right on the shoulder.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and so here I am. I get to walk to first base, but I'm just really not going up to the plate. But I gotta go again. We're hitting the ball well, so here I'm gonna spot, and the order comes up again, back at the plate, and this time the ball comes flying in even higher. And I wish I was making this up, but I had glasses on back then. I'm wearing these glasses, and the ball comes and just hits me right here in the eye.
Jeez.
Glasses shattered.
So yeah, I'm curious, is that a skill that you already find yourself doing, using these vocal noises to be part of how you pay attention?
I definitely do think that I do that normally. It's harder though when you're like making that conscious effort to do it, but I think even if it's a skill that you don't naturally have, as you practice it more, it would get a lot more natural.
I think you're right. This is a role play, and it is kind of artificial, but you're doing it right. So Jacob, will have you continue that amazing story. This time, Leah, your task is to offer a very brief content paraphrase. So just a brief summary of the story that you've heard so far.
Okay, so now I've gotten hit not only in the side, but also in the shoulder, and now the ball just came and knocks my glasses off my face. I fall to the ground, just out of pure shock.
Oh man.
And I'm about to get up, and I see that the glasses are just shattered everywhere. And I guess I'm pretty upset, but thankfully, people start to come and try to help me get up and pick up the glasses.
So it sounds like you had a few people like supporting you and trying to help you at least.
Okay, so when Leah used that simple skill in which she simply fed back to you, in her own words, what you've been talking about, what difference does that make to you as you're speaking?
Well, I just appreciated that I could tell that she was listening and making a connection from what I said, and, you know, providing her feedback and her thoughts on what I'm sharing with her.
They figured we would continue again, and this time we was really what you use is called a reflection of feeling. And so instead of responding to the words he's saying, you have to respond to the nonverbals that he's displaying. And just to put into words what you think it's like for him to be telling this story.
So obviously, I did love getting it, you know, side, shoulder, glasses. But,
Naturally.
you know, what happens next is just unbelievable. So after the inning ends, my mom has already taken my glasses and she's taken them to get fixed by the eye care center. They just have to put the one piece that popped out back in. And now she's came back with the glasses, and even though I was, you know, out of the field for that inning, the way the game works, they're going to let me come back into the game and play. And so I have the glasses on, and I'm off to pitch the next day.
Seems like that story really means something to you.
Yeah, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because at first it seems, you know, that I'm having this terrible time, but there's really a turning point there when my mom gets the glasses fixed.
So Jacob, that seemed to have really had an effect on you. Was we had simply used the skill of reflecting the feeling. So it's wonderful. As we continue, your next and final challenge is to ask just the right open question after Jacob finishes the story.
So what happened next?
So now I left off and I was pitching, and so I get into the game. I'm all excited about pitching. And I throw a great inning, you know. I get a couple guys out right away, let one guy on base, but I end up getting an inning without giving up any runs. And so even though, you know, I get hit all these times every which way, I get the opportunity to get back in the game, got the glasses fixed, and I throw a great inning of pitching. And yeah, it's just a memory I'll never forget.
Okay, so it sounds like there were kind of traumatic points, but also like a happy ending. So how did that shape your perception of baseball now?
Yeah. Well, I can't say it's the same. Yeah, I can't quite stand in the box the same way I used to, crowd on the plate, you know, when the ball's coming, I get a little nervous. Just didn't hit that high, I think, you know, it does something psychologically to you as a batter. But I still love to get out there and play with my friends, and I enjoy getting on the mound and pitching, and that's something I'll always love. So, thanks for asking.
So yeah, you just gave a very nice, compact summary of the whole conversation. And then that open question that you asked, I don't know if you saw it, but I think, Jacob, I think you really enjoyed answering that question. And I thought maybe for a second you forgot you were role playing.
Yeah.
Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. So what you just saw was not the easiest thing to do. It is a very artificial thing to do as we get used to the whole thought of role playing. The point is not naturalness. We're not going for naturalness. We're just going for trying on the skills. And as we do, we come to a better understanding of how they sound and what they're for. So if you would please turn to your study guide now, it's time for you to give it a try. Please follow the instructions there after you pause the video.
So reactions or questions about that active listening. What observations do you have?
Well, it makes sense that you need to pay attention.
Okay.
Otherwise, people think, well, they don't care what I say anyway.
Right. And, you know, the little things. Have you ever talked to somebody who makes zero facial expressions when you're talking to them? And Joel's giving me that right now.
Oh, yeah. I get great practice at work.
In fact, sometimes if you want to demonstrate, like, I do not want to be a part of this conversation, like, how can I express to you enough that I don't care about this thing that you're describing?
Well, I just told my crew here last night that personally, we don't want to talk to you at all. At least for the first hour of the day. I mean, sometimes football, 5 minutes after midnight.
Before her first cup of coffee, Katie practices that skill with me. Like, I'll try to tell her something.
Not ready for it.
Just don't talk to me yet. So you know that we sometimes can even do that on purpose because for whatever reason, you don't want to have that conversation. Maybe you think this isn't a topic that interests you, and it sounds bad when you say it out loud, but we recognize that we also do it. Like, if I just show that I'm not interested, maybe they'll just peter out a little bit, and then I won't have to be stuck here talking about this thing that I don't care about.
But the other side of that is, you don't, if Katie doesn't want to talk, you learn to pick your times to start these conversations.
Right, I'm not saying that it's necessarily always bad. And try talking to her about the Super Bowl. She'll give you that blank expression awfully quickly. Like, that, like, how soon can I get you to stop talking about football? Yeah, well, that's us. But, so sometimes it's worthwhile, like, this is not a valuable conversation that we're having. We're making small talk and we're doing it badly, and I'm not interested. But maybe instead of, when it's someone that you want to develop a relationship and develop deeper conversations with, it'd be better to try to steer the top subject to something more important or more interesting than it would be to simply. But in general, when we are interested, it's hard not to show it on your face.
But the point here is that, because she probably wasn't real interested in baseball or his experience in high school. So, it's to practice the listening skill, and it's not what.
Well, so in this role playing, yes, like, and the start of his story was a little rough, and I don't know if it was because she was so deadpan. It took him a long time to, or some stories are a slower build. But if someone's telling you, if they're not making small talk, so you're not talking about the weather or how the fish are biting or the football game or whatever it is that you don't care about, if they're sharing a story about what happened to them, even if the story doesn't seem like it's interesting, care for that person might make you pay more attention. And so, like, that story, what happened in a 6th grade baseball game when he's now 27-ish, in his late 20s, his 6th grade baseball game doesn't seem like it's that big a deal. And yet that's the story he chose to tell. It's something vivid in his mind that helps shape who he is. And so showing interest in the story, even if you're like, I don't care about a baseball game, shows not interest in the story, but it shows interest in him. And that goes a long way to developing. What about the back channeling? Do you do that naturally, or do you think you generally don't?
I think it's mostly a natural thing. I don't think people think that I need to back channel.
Right, and that makes it really unnatural when you're told to practice it, because you do naturally go, oh, okay, wow, all those different things, but when you're thinking, I need to back channel here, it makes it awkward. I think those first two, the facial expressions, and the back channeling. When we go through the process on page 1 of putting yourself physically and mentally in the space where you are going to be listening, we naturally do those. If you say, my goal here is to listen to this person, you're naturally going to lean in. Your facial expression will change. You'll nod your head along. You'll, oh, okay. Whatever that back channeling is. But then you move on to the paraphrasing content. Why is that more challenging?
You gotta prove that you're really listening.
Okay, so you really have to listen.
Well, you gotta prove it because, just nodding your head,
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to do without really hearing the word of it.
Yeah. KC by 2.
Yeah.
Why else is it challenging? Sometimes. And it becomes an important skill because you can then use it almost to focus the story a little bit. So, wow, you were just having a really rough game. Now that's also a little bit of reflecting feeling. But, or even, I don't know that I've ever heard of someone getting hit 3 times in one baseball game. The first 3 times they were up. That's incredible. Just that summary of content, it signals, oh, he's paying attention, and it refocuses, oh, but now I have to say why that turned around or how the rest of the story goes, why this story is important. You know, it's not just that I got hit 3 times, but how the game turned out. How about reflecting feeling? What makes that important? Okay? Mm-hmm. And why should you care about their story and how it makes them feel? Yeah. And if the story matters to them, then showing that you're understanding why it matters to them really helps open them up. And finally, that open question. I agree, her open question really did it changed from an awkward experience watching these 2 people role playing, and he's trying to tell the story about getting hit by pitches. But the moment she asked that, well, how did that change your perspective on playing baseball? All of a sudden, he got away from trying to think through the story, and it really opened him up to say, well, this is why it matters. This is what it does. We have like 2 minutes left. So I'm going to ask this question. When do you think it would be the best time to practice this?
All the time.
Okay? Okay? So, it is true. I mentioned my professor at the seminary who was very good at this. And it was after my victory year, Katie and I were there, and we got out, and she's like, he is a really good you got done with the conversation, you're like, you just got way more out of us than you would have expected just by practicing these skills. And you didn't notice it during.
So we go, as nurses, we go through a lot of communication screening and all of these steps. And he did it without it feeling like I'm doing these things.
But you only get that way if you're constantly thinking to yourself, how can I listen to this person better and truly understand them? And so that's why I think probably of the skills of active listening, being physically and mentally prepared to listen will get you 80% of the way there. Where it's not, I'm getting ready to share my opinion, or I'm getting ready to tell you my story, but it's really, I want to know what's going on in here and what makes you tick. That gets you 80% of the way there. And the rest is, well, how can I communicate to this person that I want to know more? And you said in the relationships you already have, yes. I was thinking, if you're married, the more you can practice this skill in your marriage, the closer you will feel. But I'll also say, I think it's one of the hardest things to practice in marriage because so much of our conversations, we have so much going on that it's let's get to the point, let's get to the point, let's get to the point. And we guys especially struggle because we want to fix things, or we want to get to the solution. And so instead of actively listening and trying to get to the feeling, it's, well, either I need to get to the point so that I can say, yes, I listened and now I know how your day went, like it's a purely fact-finding mission, or I'm going to listen so that I can have the proper response, so I can teach you something or help you something or give you advice versus let me understand you. But if this active listening is really one of the keys to building stronger relationships. Maybe we will role play next time. I mentioned to Sheila that my conference was a lot about our attitude in outreach and our mission work and our evangelism, and we started in the book of Revelation. And since you always want to talk about the book of Revelation anyways, and I think it's applicable, after we finish this video, I'm going to have a little interlude between the listen segment and the lead segment of this Bible study. So we'll do either a lesson or two, kind of incorporating what we talked about this past week, what I talked about this past week at the conference. After all, you paid for me to go there. I might as well put that information to use and help share it with you while it's still fresh in my mind. But also, I think it helps reframe things so it's not all abstract, but it's a true reality.